hopefully I'll be able to figure out the various electronics here. We'll go back and forth between videos and sound and stuff. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah.
Do I need to use a microphone?
No.
I might lose my voice. That's one of the problems with the aging process. I think that many of you could probably do the same thing I'm doing tonight. I had two choices. Either I could go into the literature and come up with all sorts of real interesting facts about corvids, or I could just remember situations that I've had with them in my 50-plus years in Alaska. And so I chose the latter. I apologize to anyone coming here to expect to get a lot of really great facts about them. But, hopefully it'll be a little more entertaining. Ravens are really difficult to photograph. But these are not really corvids, but the genus Corvidae in Australia is right next to the corvid, so I thought it was legal to put this in. But they really like to have their pictures taken. In fact, they will even take over your camera. But I was in Australia with Noble Proctor, and he is, at least for some years, he's been the top birder in the world as far as number of species seen. And I have a photograph of him with a field guide opened up to the Currawong section, and several Currawongs standing around looking at the book. And I couldn't find the slide. Someday it'll emerge. Anyway, getting to the ones that are here, probably this is our most unusual or rarest of the corvids, the Clark's nutcracker. And I'm not sure how often that's occurred in Juneau. I've only saw it once quite a few years ago. But it was a real interesting experience. It was over in Douglas, and this woman had trained it to come out of the forest and pick up a peanut from her hand. And she would go out and open up her screen door and yell, "Clarky, Clarky." This thing would fly out of the forest and grab a peanut from her hand. So birders outside of Juneau from up north really were desperate to be able to tick off a Clark's nutcracker, so they came down here, and I took them over there to see it. And this was my first experience with really hardcore listers. It showed up in the forest, and they saw it, and they said, "That's it, let's go." Don't you want to see it come out and come to this woman's hand? No, they just wanted to tick it off. The next one, which is also, I don't think that has occurred in Juneau very often, the gray jay, but it's much more common further north around the Fairbanks area. I don't have a whole lot of experiences with them. They're interesting in that they're one of the corvids in which the juvenile looks quite different than the adult. This is a juvenile. But one thing out of the literature is that they're one of the only, or very few, songbirds that can carry food in its foot. And this is a photograph of one actually with a partial loaf of bread flying off with it.
Oh, that's funny.
I've never seen it do this, but I thought it was quite interesting. Um, I know when I was living up in Fairbanks, you would see the gray jays gathering food and nesting material in the fall, and then they would actually start nesting before winter ended. And this is what they have to put up with, I guess. This is kind of moving upwards in the craziness. The black-billed magpies they nest further north. They don't nest in the Juneau area, but they're down here right now, and they spend a lot of them spend the winter with us. Their nests I would love to be able to get around and watch them in their nests. I've never had an opportunity, but they're huge globular balls of sticks. And the young, when they come out, they don't have the long tail. It takes them a while to grow it. So this is a youngster here, who's temporarily tailless. I think one of the most interesting experiences I had with these magpies was out with Mark here watching the northern saw-whet owl out at Brotherhood Park. And one of them came in and was attempting to drive it away or mob it. Usually, I think as I remember, the owl pretty much ignored it. This is something from the literature I thought was quite interesting. And I assume it occurs here with our deer, but they go up to deer and often find food by gathering the ticks and other parasites that might be associated with the deer. They're always clustered around bald eagles feeding, and like ravens, I've seen them pull the tail of a bald eagle, and then it allows another black-billed magpie to run in and grab some food. This is elevating more in the craziness. Our Stellar's jay, for a few years back, we had a jay that would come up to our windows and knock on the window. And I would go out and give it a peanut. And if I moved from one part of the house to the other, it would follow outside and knock on whatever room I was in. Very, very patient and very persistent. Just sit on the windowsill and tap, tap, tap. The one thing that's interesting about Stellar's jays is their imitation of other birds. And when they come into a feeder, they often give the imitation of a red-tailed hawk, and that immediately causes all the other birds to scatter. That's an actual red-tailed hawk. And this is a jay imitating it.
Not bad.
That sounds better than a hawk. One time when I was climbing, when I was younger, climbing Mount Jumbo, and got up near Timberline, I heard a marmot whistling from way up in this tree. And I couldn't believe it. I didn't know marmots could climb trees. If it was a jay, it gave a perfect imitation of a whistling marmot. I don't have a recording of those marmots. And another time I was actually up in Homer, walking along through the forest, and I heard this bald eagle calling. And I looked up in the tree, and it was a jay, giving an absolutely perfect imitation of a bald eagle. One time, Mary Wilson and I were out at the salmon viewing platform near the glacier, and we got really excited because there was we were convinced of the northern goshawk calling from the brush there, and doing a little bit of detective work. Of course, it was a Steller's jay. I think that during our normal rainy weather, when we do get a sunny day, we often see birds with their wings spread, and the jay certainly takes advantage of the sun. He's just taking the sun bath.
Yeah.
This one, we just had a bad feather day. This is a jay's nest. Fairly large, lots of sticks and so on, and nicely lined and everything. Now we're really getting crazy. This is something I picked up from the literature where they put out a straight piece of wire, and the crow actually bent it into a hook and would reach down into this container to pull this little vial of food up. One of the things that crows do is they have a mewing sound. It sounds just like a cat. And this was years ago, when I was doing a lot of bird recording, I recorded this sound and I played it. And this whole flock, about 50 crows, just came and lit all around me and just looked and stared at me and then flew away. I'm not sure what I was saying. And a friend of mine who's a bear guide actually had a client from outside of Alaska over in Admiralty Island and ran across a number of the crows mewing. And the client was convinced that there were a bunch of stray cats. And I asked the fellow, and he said that was true. He really couldn't believe that it was a bird making that sound. But made a recording over at the shrine, and it gives about 3 or 4 of the calls, but the mew is one of them. Sometimes you'll run across a bunch of crows, and that's all they'll be doing is doing that mewing call. It's really weird. A few years back, I had several crows that would come to the deck, and I would give them food. And I got the idea to play the shell game with them. So I took 3 paper cups, and I would put a peanut under one cup, and then shuffle it around to see if they could tell which cup it was under. And every time, they knew exactly what cup it was under. And they'd come over, and they'd pick up the cup, set it down, and then grab the peanut. And they never failed. I couldn't figure out how they... We had at our bird feeders out on the railing, we had a red squirrel for a couple of years. It would decorate the feeder, and you'd put mussel shells and leaves and things like that on top of the feeder. And the crows would come and remove these decorations. And this just infuriated the squirrel. He'd spend his entire day guarding them and chasing the crows. I nicknamed him Bower after the bower birds. Decorate Another experience with crows, I was sitting in a blind photographing bald eagles, and the crows started bringing small rocks up about 5 feet away from the blind right in front. And they put one at a time. The crow would put a small pebble there, and pretty soon all of them had a bunch of pebbles about 4 inches high, and then they left. I have no idea why they were doing that. They were marking me in some way. And I've since, when I've been out in certain areas, I'll see these little piles of pebbles. And I'm suspicious now that a lot of them are what crows do. I was pretty sure this crow was anting. You know, typically for birds to spread their wings near an anthill, and then the ants crawl on them and supposedly remove the parasites from the bird. I could find ants in that area, but not right where the bird was. Maybe it's just taking the sun down. They typically go down to the intertidal area and pick up fish and stuff and bring them back to their nests, often in the forest. This crow has a mouthful of caitlin, which come into Mendenhall River usually every year, and sometimes in pretty good numbers. And this is a crow's nest. Pretty elaborate, nice cushion. And I don't think that's their down. They probably pick up down from someplace else and lie in the nest. But the The interesting thing about crow youngsters is their blue eyes. I'm colorblind. Are those eyes blue?
Yes.
And they typically will, after fledging, will feed the youngsters for maybe about a month.